Hello everybody and welcome. Let me get all this set up. Alright. Thanks everybody for joining. Let me go shut the door real quick. Can I get you a bottle of water while you're sitting? I'm fine. Alright, I'm going to grab my cell phone as I stay hydrated. It is humid. Being in London for how many days? It was beautiful. It was 40s, 50 degrees, rain. I like it cold. I'm a cold kind of guy, and I come back here.
I like it cooler. It's nice in this room.
It
the
is.
rest of the store is warm because of the heat we get.
I know.
And then all of a sudden it's going to drop off.
Literally. Oh, that's Chicago for you, though. That's our weather. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. Sorry that I wasn't here last week. I was on vacation for 10 days visiting London, and it was beautiful, but we are here. We're ready to teach another camera class, and I'm ready to get everything started for you guys. So let me just switch this over so that way you can see everything. Alright. So today, and we'll jump right into it, we're talking about beyond the traditional camera. Now, when we talk about traditional cameras, we're talking about our mirrorless or DSLRs. For anybody who shoots film, that's also included in the conversation too when we talk about traditional. However, most of the classes that I teach and most of what I talk about really only deals with the DSLR or mirrorless cameras. But beyond that, we have a lot of content creators and we have a lot of people out there who want to get beyond what they have on their phone or on their regular camera. They want something that's compact. They want something that's durable. That's where then we start looking outside of the regular traditional cameras and we find products out there that have a little bit more oomph or have more maybe versatility. So why do we advance past that regular camera? The first things I always talk about is going to be portability and travel. You have some of these cameras that are no bigger than I would say, a pair of headphones. Some cameras are even smaller. They're the size of your hand or your fingers. They can be really tiny, easy to use, and they travel friendly really well too. Durability is pretty big with these cameras too. You wouldn't want to bang up your Sony, your Nikon, or your Canon. They're precious. They have a lot of moving pieces on the inside, and that can get damaged pretty quickly. But a GoPro is a great example of a camera that, for the most part, you can throw it underwater 50 feet and pull it back out, and it'll still function and work. Things like Insta360 do a really cool job of that too. Waterproofing, like I just said, the GoPro without any casing on there can go about 30 feet underwater. Once you put the case on there, it can go about 60 to 70 feet, which I think is impressive. Recording time. Because they're not traditional cameras, they don't necessarily have a small amount of recording space. So you can record for sometimes 3 to 4 hours on some of these cameras if you have a good charge on the battery, or if you have a battery pack connected to it. And the ability to fly or record over great distances. When we talk about drones are some of the most advanced cameras that are out there nowadays. You're seeing people use them for all sorts of different stuff. I have customers that use it for work to help them do roof inspections, all the way to people who are having a small business and they want cool outside shots of their business to show location or other things. There's so many cool things that you can do with these cameras. So it's important that if you are someone who wants to have the most versatile camera business or photography practice, you might want to look into drones or GoPros. And here's some information about those. So first thing we'll talk about, just like our intro to photography class, is where do your pictures go, and make sure you have 2 of them. SD cards are huge in the camera business, but specifically with these GoPros and mini cameras, you want to make sure you have what's called a micro SD card. Micro SD cards are going to be your best friend, and having 2 of them is just a good way of making sure if the card gets damaged and you need to have a backup, you have that ability. It'd be a really big shame if you got out to where you were going to take photos or videos and you started using your camera only to find out that the SD card you have doesn't work. So having a backup is a really good idea in my opinion. You should always travel with 2.
Does the micro come as much space as the regular one?
Yes. It's just going to be a different shape, and that's the image right here that you'll see. So traditional micro SD card will look like these guys. In most cases, when you buy one, you're going to get an adapter that'll change it from this small size into the standard big size. So I definitely would recommend having at least 2 of them just in case. They are going to be more delicate than the bigger ones. That's not to say that they can break easily, but if you bend them a little bit funny or anything, they can get damaged. Most cameras are only going to have some to no internal space on the inside. When it comes to things like the drones or the GoPros, a lot of those will have a little internal space, about 8 gigabytes worth. But if you're taking high quality video, like 4K or 5K video, that's going to fill up really fast and you're not going to have that anymore. So make sure that you have these guys. When you get them, make sure you get something with a good read and write speed. Don't just buy to buy one. Of course, if you're just beginning, do what's in your budget, do what's most friendly to you. But in the long run of things, having something with a good read and write speed goes a really long way. So I definitely would recommend getting something fast. And then I always think it's 64 gigabytes or higher. Again, these cards can fill up pretty quickly, and you'd be surprised when you're filming or you're doing video, especially high quality, how much space a card will take up. I filmed in Arizona when I was out there with my drone for about maybe 2 hours, 3 hours, and I almost filled up my entire 128 gigabyte SD card. Luckily, I had a second one inside my controller, and so it was able to then supplement the video to the other one. So 64 gigabytes or higher, that's a good number or a good starting number to have. Again, and I talk about this in the intro class, your picture shouldn't live on your memory card. The memory card is really just a way to move your photos from one device to the other. So make sure that you're properly downloading your photos, clearing your SD cards, so that way you don't lose them and that you have the photos saved to other devices. And the example that I like to use with this is this kind of pattern. So to make sure you don't lose anything, let's start by landing your drone and turning the camera unit off first. Land the drone, turn the camera off, whatever it's taking, whatever you're doing, and then wait 5 seconds. The 5 seconds that you're waiting allows for everything to power down, slow down, and basically get ready for you to then transfer everything over before you then remove the card. So you want to make sure that the device itself powers itself down, saves everything that it's supposed to save, and then is ready to then be moved over. We can remove the card from the unit and insert it into a card reader. I always recommend using your card reader. Don't use your camera to read the card or send pics to the computer. The reason being is that if you're using the camera or the drone, you run the risk of damaging the product. And it could be something as simple as if it's a long night, you just filmed a bunch, you've got your camera on the table plugged into your computer and a cup of coffee. If you knock that cup of coffee over, you could really damage the camera and lose everything. Worst case scenario, you dump it onto the SD card, and the SD card for the most part is rugged. So those shouldn't be damaged pretty easily. So they should save and process the images, and you should be able to wipe it off and use it. So try your best not to use the camera to read the images or to transfer the images.
So it sits in a holder, the SD card sits in a holder?
Yes.
That's the size of
A standard
regular
SD
card, and then it goes in the card?
Exactly. Yep. That's the easiest way that I would do it. Same thing as like what we talked about with the intro classes. Again, not to damage your camera or anything and not to put your camera at risk, but with the micro SD card, most of them will come with that adapter. And if they don't, a lot of SD card readers have 2 slots on there where you can do regular size and micro.
On a card, on a regular card, it goes directly to it.
Exactly. So like for example, when we look at something like this unit, this little trifecta, this has both on there. This has your big size and your small size. The reader on the left side there, that also has 2 sizes as well, so you can do multiple. When you get into something like the 2 on the right, those are for more heavy-duty cards, things like your CF Express for your bigger cameras that professional photographers are using. It's not very common for your, I would say, entry-level card readers. So the next thing on there is you want to copy them to a destination folder. Don't move, copy them. And the reason I say that, and I'll say it again as well too, is by doing the copy, you're ensuring that your photos are in the SD card, and then you're copying them to the computer. If something goes wrong and the SD card comes undone, or the computer shuts down while you're transferring, you're running less of a risk to lose your photos via that transfer. So definitely copying them ensures that they're going to live in one other place before they get copied to the computer. Once they're copied to the computer, then you can go ahead and delete everything on the card, and we'll talk about that next. next. But using Windows, you use Explorer, and if you use Mac, you use Finder. That's the easiest way to figure out where you're sending a ball to. And then copy photos to a second place. The second place can be anything you want it to be, but I recommend either using an external drive, and if you have Amazon Prime, you have access to Prime Photos, which is their cloud-based solution. And if you have Google or Gmail, you have the Google Drive, which is really nice too. Those are great examples of places to save your stuff too. That way you're ensuring that, again, if you have them on your computer, now you've got them on one other location, and that would be now on your physical drive or on one of your cloud-based solutions. Lastly, you're going to eject the card before physically removing it. Format the card in the camera. So I get asked this question a lot. Do you necessarily need to do it? No, but it is a much easier solution than taking all of your individual photos from the old card, deleting them on the reader, and then inserting the card back in. If that's quicker for you, go ahead and do that. There is really no problem with doing either or. I personally like to format the card in the camera itself. Reason being is that once you insert it into the card and you format it, you're preparing the card to be ready for that physical device. So if you are someone who's using a multitude of cameras, it is nice to format the card in each individual camera. It doesn't damage the card to format it over and over again, but it will delete all of the old information on the card once it's formatted, and then you don't have to necessarily go through, drag it all to the trash
So
can.
are you saying you take your regular camera and put the card in there just to format it?
Yeah.
Then it won't work in the GoPro.
Well, then you can format it in the GoPro.
And that's what you mean.
Exactly, yeah. You can format it in any camera that you want to format it in. Obviously, when you format it for that camera, it still will work in other cameras. If I format my card in there and then I put it to a GoPro, it'll still work. The problem is that because I formatted the card specifically, it's going to intake the information better on that camera. Or again, if I do it on the GoPro, it's going to do it better for the GoPro. So it's all really dependent on exactly which system that you're using.
So all these extra other types of cameras, or whatever they're called, format sort of the same way
Exactly.
they do.
Yeah. Menu settings, go through format, and then it'll help. But yeah, all because they all function very similar to each other. Some of them just have different specs than others. They all can do that. And then again, I showed this in the intro class, but I like to re-up on it. Your backup plan with everything. SD card or micro SD card is over here. That's your primary way of saving the information. You then transfer that over into your laptop. That's your way of getting everything off of the card so that way you have it ready in one way or the other. Then from there you got the option. You can either go an external hard drive or you can go cloud-based solution depending on what you want. I personally recommend the cloud or the hard drive because I like having a tangible item. But some people get paranoid about that if it doesn't turn on one day or if you spill something on it and damage it, then in that case I probably would recommend doing a cloud-based solution too so you have both. Some cloud-based solutions to try. Google Drive is great. Creative Cloud from Adobe is another great resource on there. I highly recommend that, especially if you want to edit your photos or videos, because you can. And then OneDrive. If you're with a business or a company, a lot of people use Microsoft Outlook for their emails for work. Automatically, you have access to OneDrive, which is Microsoft's solution. So it's a great resource too. So we'll do a tour of your device. Now for this, we're basically going to go through, and this doesn't take too long on everything. So again, anybody online who's watching, if you have questions, please jump in and ask anything. Just chat away, I'll answer it. But we're going to go through each of the major categories and talk about what that really means and then kind of how those buttons function and what they do. So the first one I like to talk about are GoPros and action cameras. These are going to be cameras that you can take underwater with you. They have hundreds of different accessories that you can use on this, and they're probably one of the most durable cameras on the market. I have a lot of kids who want to buy them, but I also have a lot of adults who really like them. So they're very popular for kind of all ages or all around. The cool part about the GoPros or action cameras is that they're roughly around a little bit bigger of a width of a paperclip. They're very, very on par when we compare that to it. A A lot of people use a pencil to describe the thickness or thinness of an iPhone or a cell phone, but with GoPro, you really can compare the size pretty well to a paperclip, a standard size. The camera itself is very, very small. It's very pocket sized. You can really take it anywhere. But with this, it only has 2 buttons. The capture button, which takes a photo or starts and stops your video. That's going to be located in the top of the unit. It's a little red circle. And that's your main button for starting and stopping the video or taking a photo. You'll click that anytime that you're doing something on there. You'll hear a little beep on the camera, and typically it'll be signified then too with a little red dot that appears on the screen, both on the front and the back. That indicates to yourself and to others that you're recording. Again, that's done more for safety and also for a little bit of education on there too.
Is the quality of a photo decent?
I would say so, yeah. Most of these cameras have 24, 48 megapixels on there. Yeah, they're small. The key to this to remember when you're comparing this to then a bigger camera is that the sensor on this camera is very, very tiny compared to yours. Even with a crop sensor or a full frame camera, this is going to have a significantly smaller sensor to that. So the image, as far as maybe blowing it up or zooming in or cropping, isn't going to be as pretty.
But it doesn't.
But it still doesn't, and it still is a really clean photo if you leave it as is. The power button, now the power button has 2 different functions to it. By holding this power button down, it'll turn on and off the unit, and that's pretty self-explanatory. Hold it down, it'll beep a few times, turns it on. Hold it again, it'll beep a few more times, turns it on. But on the flip side of that, you can also toggle between your modes. Now, because this can take both photo, video, and time-lapse, the power button with one single click will switch between those settings. So if you want to do a video, you'd make sure that your camera was set to video, and you could just hit the mode button on the side of the power button one time, and it'll move to video. If you're not on video and you want to get there, usually it's one click, and then it'll move you over. So you have the ability to switch between everything there. Now the main big feature on those cameras is going to be the screen. The screen, in my opinion, is your everything. That's why with a lot of these cameras, they have accidental warranties, they have damage warranties, and I usually don't push a lot of those when I'm selling things in the store, but I definitely recommend with these cameras because of how durable they are, but also because of how they get thrown around and tossed around. They definitely can take a beating. So the screen on the flip side though, that's your touchability. You can toggle between the quality of video, you can toggle between the aspect ratio. If you're doing a time lapse, you can set it for the exact amount of time you want it to go for. There's a lot that you can do with switching on the screen there. Also it'll show you the duration of time your battery has left, how much room is on your SD card. Some other features too that it can show might be the, there's one more. Oh, the hyper, or the stability on there. You can switch between the stability of the camera. Do you want a shaky video? If you want to turn that on, you can turn all of that on the screen itself. So there's the 2 main buttons, but then the screen becomes really your main control of the whole camera. Things you can access with the screen. So frames per second, angle and lens millimeter size. So for example, wide, 16 to 34 millimeter, you have that ability to change those on there. So it's really cool that you can switch between and get the angle that you're looking for. From there, the video quality, so you can switch between things like 1080 HD, 2.7 or 4K video. They have hindsight on there, which is a newer feature on there, but that's the camera's focusing ability. When you're using something like GoPro and you're filming, the GoPros, the newer models, are really smart. They can recognize if a person walks in front of them, and they can actually focus in a little bit more, which is nice. A lot of modern DSLRs and mirrorless cameras do that automatically, and we take that for granted. But when you're coming into these smaller cameras, for the most part, they didn't have that for a long time. They would just do a nice wide angle, keep everything in focus, and it would look really pretty, but it would take the battery up a little bit more, and it wouldn't help if you were trying to just focus in on one thing. Hypersmooth is GoPro's ability to stabilize the video as you're going. So a lot of the times you'll see people use these when they kayak or they bike, they'll bolt them to their helmets, they'll put them on their chest. if you didn't have hypersmooth turned on, you'd see every bump and jump and everything on the camera. It would look really ugly. But because we have hypersmooth on there, it really does tone things down and you get a really clean video. And then lastly too, there's a front screen on these cameras for the most part, and that will show you your video duration and also give you a little bit of a selfie mode so you can see exactly what you're recording. So if you've got the camera set up like this to get the best video, you'll see on the screen there what you're filming. Gives you an idea of the frame and everything else so that you get the best for what you're trying to do.
What kind of zoom is there?
It's not really good. It's not the best. Typically with these, you're going to see 2 to 3 times zoom from what their standard video is. So usually for the example, they'll have like a wide millimeter or a wide, and that'll be 16 to 34. They'll have a portrait, which will be like 50 to 75. And then they'll have a zoom, which usually I want to say goes up to like 100 millimeter, but it's really not anything too crazy on there. Typically, I don't recommend zooming on these cameras. So again, to go back into the modes, photo allows you to capture stills and frames rather than take videos. Time lapse or hyperlapse, turn the video on and it will capture the video over a duration of time. Then it'll compress the video and play that captured video over a period of time to play within minutes or seconds. So if you're, let's say, recording a sunset and the sunset's going over, and obviously that's going to take maybe 45 minutes to fully go down, the video can speed that up and make it about 1.5 minutes long, which is really cool. So that 45-minute sunset then turns into a minute, and you get to really see everything go through, and it's really cool to watch. A regular video, you can record that video for whatever duration of time you want, whatever quality you want, and then also you get features like hypersmooth or hindsight that you can turn on and off.
Can you take a picture from the video?
No. So most cameras don't give you that ability. Panasonic, on the other hand, if that's something, I get people who come in all the time and ask for that, Panasonic actually does give you that ability, where if you're shooting a video, they have a switch on there that you can hit, and what it does is it doesn't necessarily take a photo, but it removes a frame from the video and puts it off to the side. So as it's recording the video and it's basically doing everything, it will then pull the frame out and then give you that extra little kind of image. And so I like to use these images to kind of describe why do we like to use an action camera. And this is kind of the bread and butter of why you'll see someone use them. There's thousands of accessories you can get for the GoPro that make it almost impossible to not put it everywhere. You can hang it on trees. I had a dad come in who was doing his son's tennis games, and he bought a contraption that latched onto the fence of the chain link for the tennis tournaments, and he could record the whole court. It was awesome. He was so excited about it. He kept showing me everything, etc. People will also use it to go underwater. They'll do some really cool videos where they're taking pictures or videos of everything that's going on around them, which I think is really awesome. The same thing too, you get these really cool point of view videos where if you're biking or you're kayaking, it's right on your chest and you're seeing everything in front of you, which I think is really unique. And then you get other little gadgets and gizmos, like with this one where it's attached to a dog right now. It's just really fun. It's something silly that you can do with it. I actually have a really cool video. I put mine on my dog and I took him to the beach and he had such a good time, but as he's running around, you just see his ears flopping and it was just really cute. Drones. So I would say drones are probably one of the best sellers at this point. GoPros still are really great, but I think GoPro is so good about being so durable that people will have their GoPros for 7-8 years before they really start to kind of kick the bucket, or at least 4 to 5 years. Whereas drones, I would say in the last, let's say, 10 years, drones have really taken a big jump, and they've become, especially this DJI company, they've become very, very popular, and they're very powerful, and they can really do a lot of cool things. So main drone types we're going to be talking about are quadcopters. But these are examples of all different models that DJI currently is carrying. So there's tons of different drones out there. There's a lot of research that could go into getting the right drone for you. And we'll talk about some of those things. First thing is going to be drone types. Now, there's a lot of different ones out there, and we'll talk about all of these. To start, a single rotor drone, that's going to look like your typical helicopter. Typically, you're not going to see these being used for things like high quality videos or for anything serious. They're mainly a toy. So single rotors, you'll see those at your hobby stores or at your local toy shop. Those are cool, but they're not necessarily going to be the best for taking video or photo. That's where quadcopters come in. Now, quadcopters are going to be the most popular style of drones sold on a consumer level. They've got 4 blades, and that's where we're getting the name of 4 separate blades. So single rotor, you got the one on the top, helicopter. Quadcopter, it's going to have 4 blades spinning on itself, and that's what's going to give you the stability that you're looking for to get the best video possible. Now there's 2 main types. There's an FPV and a cinedrone. FPV is going to need goggles to fly, but typically only comes as a quadcopter. And the cool part about that, when the goggles are on, it's a first-person view. So you get to see exactly what the drone is seeing as it's flying, and it's really cool for people who want more of an action or a thrill-based product. They're probably not buying this to film a lot of videos. They're buying this maybe more for fun, for the joy, the experience. It's a very cool experience. Cinedrones, on the other half, or just your standard quadcopters, those are going to fly as a quadcopter, but have a high-quality camera and usually have tracking features on there. So one of the cool things about the drones is as you're flying, a lot of these drones have the ability for you to circle in on certain objects or targets, and it will then follow or track that object. So my example, I had a gentleman come in and he wanted to buy a drone for a trip he was doing in California. He was going to ride his motorcycle along the coastline. And when he was doing that, he actually set the drone up and circled himself on the screen. The drone kept perfect stillness of him and flew above him as he was riding his motorcycle. So we got a really cool video of him just kind of cruising around the coastline, and the drone is just following the entire time. Hexacopters, they're 6-bladed copters. They're the best for filming and the stability in the air. A hexacopter is going to cost thousands and thousands of dollars, require multiple permits for you to use it, and really the only people that you'll see use this are movies, because they can put on their most expensive camera gear on there and it'll support the weight. I've even seen videos of hexacopters where people can stand on them and it can actually lift them. It's so heavy and powerful. Again, they're very cool, but they require a lot more, not necessarily maintenance, but a lot more permits and more training to actually use one. You're not going to see them typically sold on a consumer level. And then the last one you see is a fixed wing rotor. More of a plane experience and great for people who want less of the copter experience, more of that plane feeling. Again, I would say single rotor and fixed wing rotor are more of your hobbyists. They're not necessarily used for filming or for videos. They're used for people who just like to fly. So when we're using the drones, it's important to have a kind of a feel for what controls that you do have control over. Because yes, the drone is in the air, but you control most everything on the drone. So your control sticks, each stick will have a different customizable setting, but one joystick will control your up and down movement as well as your rotation. The other will control your front and backwards and side to side rotation too, which is nice. There's antennas. You point those outwards, and those are the connection point between the drone and the controller. Some drones don't have antennas anymore because the antennas are built in, but a lot of modern or high-powered controllers will have antennas that are sticking out. Gimbal dial. So as you're using the drone, one of the things you'll notice on the controller is that you have the ability to move the camera up and down to do more of a panning or a kind of controlled dial function. There's a record button on there. Clicking this will record or take a picture for you. So again, depending on which setting you're using, if it's photo or video, which you can do both on the drones, you can take a picture or start the record or stop the record. Focus and shutter, this will give you a refocus on what you're filming or shooting, or it just gives you control over the shutter as a whole. So one of the cool things that I like about the focus and shutter dial is that if, let's say that you want to zoom in, that's typically what the focus or shutter dial will allow you to do. So you get some zoom on these drones. If, let's say, you want to use aperture priority or aperture control on there, you can do that on there. Same thing with focus. If you want to manually focus your drone as you're using it, that gives you the ability to do so too.
How are you seeing this?
All on the physical controller.
On the controller, there's a
Yes.
screen?
There's two options. I don't know if I think I show a picture, but it shows a little bit more of an outdated controller on there. But the controller, you'll see built-in controllers with screens on there, or you'll be able to hook your phone onto there. And I know I have a slide that talks about them a little bit more, so I'll talk more too. Last thing on there is the RTH button, and that gives you the ability to send the drone back to you from where you took off.
Okay.
So my biggest qualm with this, do not use this on a moving object. Return to home doesn't bring it back to the controller. It brings it back to where you originally took off from. So when you start to fly, the drone, it can connect to the controller, and obviously you can move different places, but if you're flying and you hit the RTH button, it's going to come back to where you took off from. So my example, I have a gentleman who owned a boat. He was very happy about his boat. He was flying around this lake that is part of his property. He loved it. He took off with the boat, took the drone up, was doing stuff. They moved the boat around a bunch. He had the drone in the air for an hour. It was awesome. It had really good battery life on the model that he was using. When they moved the boat and then he hit the return to home button, it went to where the boat originally was and landed right into the water. So we learned the hard way on that one. If you're using that RTH button, make sure you're staying stationary. Don't move. This is the example of the controller. Now this is an example of a controller that uses the ability to lock your phone into place. They usually have clamps that hook onto the side. You push those in and then they securely grab the phone so that way you can see everything that the drone is seeing.
But you could also see it on the screen.
Exactly. And I think I mentioned that on the bottom there, Proverse phone controller. So before I mention those, the other thing to be keep an eye out for is geofencing. Because you're technically in the air, you're now in a different space. The drone itself, or the flying, is all monitored or controlled by the federal government. So that's an important thing to remember. Your local government really doesn't have any say over how you can and can't use your drone. Evanston actually brought this to court. There was a few kids, and they weren't doing anything bad from what I was reading on there. They were really just flying around a public park. And a cop came by and told them, no, you can't fly there. Well, their parents took offense to that because they spent all this money, they bought the kids the drones. They then took Evanston Township to court on this, and they said, from everything that our lawyers and we've researched, you guys have zero policy or say over what we can and can't do with our drones as long as we're not on private property or other sorts of, not allowed areas.
Mischievous stuff.
Exactly, mischievous stuff, but as long as you're not if you're in public space, you can fly your drone wherever you choose to fly. The government basically, or the court sided with the family, and it was a big deal for a little bit there, but it's not up to your local or state government to control the use of the drones. It's only the federal government that has say over how you can use the drones. Those usually go into them what we call geofencing. Geofencing is a virtual wall. It really won't let you push your drone any further, and if it does, it's up to you to kind of understand the warnings of where you're at. Most of the time when you're flying, especially with the controller, it can locate you via the geofencing and tell you exactly where you cannot go. But things to remember with this is that typically the fencing exists by airports, government buildings, national parks, certain cities and properties. So in certain cases as you're flying, my example when I was in Arizona, there's a lot of Native American reserves. There are no flying zones. If you go anywhere near there, they can first off shoot them down, but then technically if a police officer finds out and you're picked up on radar, you can get a very big ticket for flying in a no-fly zone.
What about private dwellings?
It's all dependent, and the maps show on there exactly where you can't go. I would assume that with private dwellings you might be able to fly in that area, but you have to stay above a certain height, so that way you're not able to pick things up on the ground and see things. For example, the City of London, you're not allowed to fly more than 50 meters off the ground. So you have to be 50 or above off the ground in order to fly. So that way you can't see things like faces. You can't pick up on things like license plates. It's just their way of saying you can fly and enjoy the big city and take in everything, but if you get to the point where you can start picking up people's personal identification and property, that's where then it's a no. So there's certain laws that you'll see with that. So again, it's all dependent on where you're at. If you go on to the website for DJI and you just type in geofencing policy, you can actually type in by your zip code where you can't fly. Washington, D.C. is a big one. There's literally no flying anywhere in the area of Washington, D.C. Everywhere. No, yeah. And just because of the White House in general, it's like, I believe there is a 500 or 700 meter rule to that. Like, you can't even fly within 700 meters of the White House by itself, so that affects everything there. Now, the big thing with the Pro versus phone controllers is that the drone will require some sort of screen. So when you're asking about it, yes, you need a screen in order to fly the drone. Now, when you're using the Pro controller that has the built-in screen, you don't need your cell phone. You can use the cell phone to connect to the drone, which is really nice, and you can get the geofencing and everything else that we're talking about. But if you don't have that, you get with the maybe cheaper option, all you need to do is connect your cell phone to the controller. It takes a few seconds, that then connects to the drones, and it functions really well just in general. Even if someone calls you on the phone or something happens and your phone goes dead, your drone itself shouldn't just crash and hit the floor. It has safety precautions built into it so it can come back to you and do all of that stuff. I personally, with my drone, I have a screen built onto it, so I don't have that kind of problem to ever worry about, but every time I've flown, even if the controller didn't have a good battery life, I've had it a couple times where the controller's basically dead, that the drone will automatically come back and start to land, so that way it just doesn't topple out of the sky.
Does it know how to avoid trees and stuff?
Certain models do. So certain models, and it's the ones that have that active track feature that we were just talking about, where you can follow yourself, they have sensors built onto them. So what they'll do is when they're doing the active track, if they're flying and they notice that there's a sign or something coming up, they will go and avoid and then continue to fly. Same thing, if they're flying and a tree branch is there and they're trying to track you as you're underneath, they'll basically just drop down and then continue to follow. It's a really cool feature. Some of the other drones, though, don't have that. And with that, though, they don't give you the active track feature, because when you're flying, you should, in all trueness and respect, should be keeping an eye on the drone the entire time. You should basically be at one face on the screen and then constantly looking up at your drone. You never know what can happen with it, and especially with the drone, because it's a flying object and you're down below, keeping an eye out for other things. I don't have necessarily any stories about it, but I did see a video online. A gentleman was flying in Venice Beach, California, and it was beautiful, gorgeous video. You see all the skateboarders and surfers everywhere. But then someone else was flying their drone at the exact same time, and they had a mid-air collision. And I've never seen anything like it before, but I got to see this video clip of it, and he got to salvage the video on there. It just goes to show that, again, anything can happen with these, but keeping an eye on your product really does go a long way.
Well, doesn't it go far enough away where you can't?
You can, but then that's still under the discretion of the flyer. You should still be technically keeping an eye on that thing. So even if it goes, how much further away, then technically you probably shouldn't be flying that much. You shouldn't be going that way. You should physically move yourself in order to make sure you're doing it. Exactly. Do people do that all the time, though?
No.
Not necessarily. But on the screen itself, other than the active track, cancel, and start, you're going to see distance from you and the drone. So it'll show you exactly how many meters away your drone is. What's the altitude of the drone? It'll tell you that. Some places that you fly have rules where you can't go above 150 meters off the ground based on altitude of airplanes or something else. This area is known as a Class B flying zone because we have Milwaukee Airport down the street. So technically, you cannot be over 335 feet off the ground without getting picked up on the radar. So, the ability to switch between photo and video gets done on the screen. On the bottom of your screen, you have a little map that shows you the geofencing and the surrounding area that you're in, so you can kind of get an idea of where you can and can't fly, or what the parameters behind that are. RTH, the return to home button. Then you also have an immediate land button. I personally don't use the RTH button that often when I fly. I like to keep an eye on my drone when I'm going. I am particular about that because I'm scared of crashing my $1,000 drone. So what I'll do is I'll bring it by me, and then I'll either press immediate land, or I will just then turn the joystick down and then bring the drone to the ground. As you keep bringing it lower and lower to the ground, it'll sense that the ground is coming up, and you'll hear this beeping noise on the controller saying, drone is preparing to land, landing in progress, and then it'll just start landing. Now, with the drones, the biggest thing that needs to be understood is the permits that are required with these. Now, I say that because it's important for your safety and for the safety of others around you, but it also comes down to your bottom dollar in your pocket, because these fines for drones can be very, 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 very high. So, best example that I have, even if you have a permit, you are legally not allowed to fly in a national park. They don't want you crashing, they don't want you disturbing the peace of the animals that live in there. They're protected sacred grounds. If you fly in a national forest and you're caught, the fine can be upwards of $10,000. So it's not, and it also can lead to jail time too if you crash and hurt. The story went a few years ago that someone was flying and a bald eagle hit one and ended up killing the bald eagle, and that person got 10 years in jail. I'm sure they could appeal and do other things, but the severity of the law is there with these.
You fly one of those like in Brookfield Zoo or Lincoln Park Zoo?
You have to take a look and see the parameters on it. I imagine that the property themselves could probably say something against it. And I imagine with the geofencing and everything else, there's probably a red bubble around it saying no fly. I would have to imagine with the animals and everything else that there's probably safety there. So when you're getting a drone, there's really two permits that you can purchase. The first thing I always like to highlight with this is that if you have a drone under 249 grams, you do not need a permit of any kind unless you're doing commercial work for business or pay. So if you are someone who's like, I want to add a drone to my video repertoire and all of the wedding videos, or maybe the other content videos that you're shooting, you want to make sure that people can see those, and you want to add the drone to that, that's fine, but then you've got to sign up for these different permits. The main permit, if you have a drone above 249 grams, is just your standard registration. That can be accessed on the FAA.gov website. It costs $5. You get a course to follow and read on, information too that's needed, and then after completion, you have to clearly write out the permit number on the drone. If, let's say, a law enforcement officer or someone stops you and says, hey, we'd like to check your drone, we want to check your permit, everything else, if you show it's 249 grams, they're not going to stop you. They'll just basically hand it back to you, say you're fine. If it is above 249 grams and you don't have any way of showing a permit, they can confiscate that or then give you a citation of some sort. So $5, definitely worth it if you have a drone that's heavy. If you are doing work for business or pay and it's commercial work, that's where you need your Part 107. Your Part 107, you pay about $175. You take a course on flying, and after completion, you can now do commercial and business-based work with your drone. The idea behind that is really to make sure that you understand how to fly your drone, you understand the safety of your drone, and you understand kind of the legality of it. Because, again, when people are using these drones for commercials or businesses, the thing I've been seeing lately, which is really cool, these gentlemen will take people will take their drones and they'll fly into buildings, and they'll go through, a lot of colleges are doing this for recruitment videos. They'll take their gymnasium and they'll basically start with the drone flying through like a classroom, and you'll see everything, and then it'll go through the door and out the hallway, and then it goes into the locker room. People are working out, lifting weights, and you always see it where the guy will be doing like the bench press, and then the drone will fly right between his arms and go into the gym, and you'll see the court and everything else. It'll leave, go to the football field, and it's awesome. But the amount of practice, skill, but the legality of it, that's where then the Part 107 comes in. So if you are someone who wants to get into that, make sure you follow that and do that correctly, so that way there's nothing that can be processed against you. Me personally, I don't do anything with my drone for money. So when I fly my drone, the only thing I do that benefits anyone is I work for the Chicago Polar Bear Plunge. And with our Polar Bear Club, when I'm doing all my stuff, I do fly and take videos of everything, put it together, but I don't do it for any commercial or business work. So it's just for them to be able to use to promote their event. It's charity, non-for-profit.
Is your drone more than 249?
It is not more than 249. So mine's under that weight too. So I also have kind of a nice leeway with that too. Now, if I ever did accept any commercial base for that, and I was doing it for a company or anything else, then I would have to do it. But because I do it for a non-for-profit, there's a little bit more leeway with that. Why use a drone? So again, we talk about all the controls and everything else, and it's a really kind of complex or complicated item. The thing I like to show with these are these larger than life photos. When you get pictures or views of mountaintops, it's really impossible for you to get up there with a helicopter and take photos of it, or it wouldn't make cost-effective sense. But buying a drone and then using that and playing with it, it's really cool what you can then do with that, and then how you're able to then show and play. I love that. Using things to then zoom in, or to get maybe more like scenery, or scene shots, I should say. That's another really cool way of using the drone. Again, looking at something like the Miami beachfront, where you have all of these different lines and items and movement, it's really cool what you can do with the drone in order to get those sharp images and pictures. And the last thing I like is going to be group photos. Funny enough, every year for Christmas, my family gets together, and every year I have everybody stand in the front of the house, I fly the drone, and I actually take a beautiful picture of all of us. Nobody has to be behind the camera, nobody gets left out, nobody has to set a timer and then run over and get back into place. You can simply just fly the drone, put it behind your hand, the controller, and then just pull the trigger. And you can do it as many times as you want, go through it, and they're sharp images, they're good quality. So camcorders, this is a pretty light one. The next two don't have too much complications to them. They're very simple products, I should say. But again, they're popular. Camcorders are a great way for someone who's just worried about filming. They want just cinematography. Now, when we talk about camcorders, one of the big upgrades to a camcorder versus your regular mirrorless or DSLR is the fact that, number one, they have built-in stabilization, which most mirrorless cameras will nowadays. But number two, they have digital zoom, which is huge. Most cameras that you buy that are mirrorless or DSLR have optical zoom, meaning that the lens, the glass, that is doing the zooming for you, and that's what does the focusing. Whereas on the inside of these cameras, they have a stabilization and a gimbal that allows them to go back and forth with little to no movement on the video quality itself, but while keeping that kind of quality, if you will. So it keeps that sharpness, it keeps that clean video. It's really nice. Now, as far as photo is concerned, that's where these lack a lot of the time. The cool part with a camcorder is, as you're using it, they do have buttons on there where, as you're filming, you can press it and it'll take a photo at the same time. So similar to what you were asking earlier. Again, but however, they are more geared towards video taking. So things that you'll see on the physical camcorders: the power button, your record button, those are pretty self-explanatory. Your ability to toggle zoom. So again, if you're taking a video and you're doing something, most of these cameras will have a little switch on the side where you can zoom in and out. And they keep it so it's ergonomic on the hand, so that way you don't have to use two hands. You can usually just use it with one and then just switch between it. Kind of looks like a trumpet to me. Photo button is on there. Focus knob or dial. So again, you can use your autofocus, but one of the things I talk to people about a lot with their video is when they ask me how they should be shooting video, I always strongly and highly recommend using using your focus dial or knob on there. Because if you have someone walking in front of you while you're filming, what can happen on autofocus is that the camera will automatically focus on the closest object to it. If you're using manual focus, then if you walk in front of my view, it shouldn't disturb what I'm recording already. So if I'm recording you and someone were to walk in front of me, it would still keep you in perfect focus and not automatically jump to the person who just walked
Based on the
up.
autofocus.
Based on the manual focus, yes. As long as you keep manual focus on there.
But how do you know it's in focus if it's manual?
You just got, that's where that knob and dial.
That's where your eye is?
Well, that's where the knob or the dial comes in. So on the front of these cameras, very similar to how a regular mirrorless would work, most of these cameras have a little ring that goes around the front of the camera, and that's your focuser on there. So you use that to refocus and readjust to see what you're trying to get. I always recommend using manual focus for video, specifically for the point of if something does come through the crosshairs, your autofocus is automatically going to pick up on the closest thing that it sees, where manual focus will stay on whatever you focus to. Iris or aperture control. So again, when we talk about aperture control, making sure that what we're keeping in focus and what we're blurring out, foreground and background relationship, you have all of that on one of these. Shutter speed, same thing. Some of these are moving at a different speed. We call that FPS, but we can also call it shutter speed. Frames per second is big in the video world, and you want to make sure that you have the correct frames per second in order to get the video that you're looking to get. White balance comes onto there, your ability to adjust and play with the brightness of an image, and because white color typically is the most bright part of images, it's important that we have the ability to adjust on that so it doesn't oversaturate or overpower our video. And then we also have playback controls. One of the most classic things with camcorders was the ability to take the camcorder and plug it into the TV in order for us to see our video afterwards. Nowadays, you can still do that with most camcorders, which I think is really cool and unique. But what you can really do with them is go through and play back the entire video on the camcorder to see what you recorded. Like I said, camcorders are not as complicated as your mirrorless or your DSLRs, at least not at the stage of which that we're really talking about. If you buy some of these Red Pro cameras, or you buy the FX lineup from Sony, or you buy some of these Blackmagic cameras, those are going to have some more complex and more detail-oriented features on them. But typically when you're going into that, it's because you have some form of experience in filmmaking. You're not just starting off. So it's really not something to be too worried about. But reasons I like camcorders, and I think why you can use one, is the ergonomic grip on them. They're small, they're portable, they're compact, they're easy to use. You can really take them anywhere, and if you're someone who wants to record video on the vacation mainly, then a camcorder might be the best for you. The ability to get more cinematic shots on there. When we look at things like our top right and our top left image, the ability for you to get something that's more maybe focused on the cinematic qualities or the setup or details of a video are really cool on a camcorder, and something a little more unique than using a mirrorless or a DSLR. And then second is going to be the accessories, or then how you're able to set this up. A lot of people will set up a rig on their camera, and a rig usually will have batteries, it'll have filters, it will have screens, it'll have microphones on there, and they all connect to the camera and kind of sync in so that way you have more of a movie style camera on your camcorder. So using them, it's typically if you are someone who wants to do more video, you're looking to do more cinematic quality, and you're not as focused on the photo, you're mainly focused on getting that video, then I think camcorders are a great, great option. And lastly, 360 cameras. Now, 360 cameras have really become popular over the last few years. This brand called Insta360 is one of the leading industry leaders when it comes to the 360 cameras. GoPro has their Hero 360 Max. And what a 360 camera really is that you have a camera that has two 180 anamorphic lenses on either side. And they kind of ball out of the camera. They look like kind of half an eyeball that's coming out. They're fantastic to be able to get video, but they're great for someone who wants to get more creative with their video. You get these very cool 360 videos where your camera's shooting everything around you, and you're able to then go back and select focus points, crop in, change everything, or make everything look bigger than life. And it's a really cool and fun feature. So it works and functions like all other action cameras for the most part. Most of these cameras, you can take them underwater, you can bang them around, you can shoot on one lens or shoot on both. You have a lot of flexibility there. But again, they have two 180-degree firing cameras, and it works with one or both of them. The other cool part of these is that it can hide or make selfie stick invisible. So if you're using a selfie stick or a pole of any kind, most of these called the scene, where what they'll do is, because those cameras are coming together, where they come together, that seam line that they would be on, it can actually put the stick that you're using to hold the camera right there and block it all out. So it'll literally look like the camera's just floating and following you, and that's then just, your hand is just out like this. Some people even get pieces where they can put a vest on and have it where it's flying off of them to the side. Same idea. Creates a third-person view unlike other cameras. Again, when you have this camera and you're pointing it out, it will then focus in on you, or you can change the diameter of where it's focusing to, which I think is really cool. Videos can be viewed from a VR headset. So if you're wearing if you're filming and doing all this, if you want, you can actually, the original point of these 360 cameras was that people could put headsets on, and then from there, if I'm watching in one angle, if I turn around and look the other way, the video will move, and I can then see the other part that got filmed. If I look up, I can see everything above me. If I look down, I can see below me. So it's a really cool way of submerging yourself into content creation. You get a lot of people who are selling homes. A lot of real estate agents are getting into this, where they'll bring and buy these cameras to film a house and to show all of the details throughout the entire place, which I think is really cool and unique.
Just don't move too far with you. That's it.
Exactly, exactly. And then the last thing too is they're small, they're compact, and they're durable. Again, you can bang them around, you can use them for a lot of different things. Most of them have an app that you can download on your phone, and Insta360 is huge on this one. The app that you download onto your phone actually allows for you to customize and change your video right there. So you don't even need to bring it to a computer and do any of that other stuff. And I think that's a really beautiful thing, especially for content creators and young kids who are trying to make a living off of making videos or content. You have the ability of customizing on the go and making it really simple. So why do we use 360 cameras? And these are some images to really kind of give you an idea. You get these larger than life images where you can really see everything around you and kind of play around and experiment. It looks really cool. Same thing with the one on the left-hand side. You have other opportunities too where you can just be more creative and you get a chance to maybe do something that's not normally seen. So in this case, the gentleman has it, he's doing a cartwheel as he's filming, but it just kind of looks like he's just standing like this, and that the ground around him is turned into this ball. And very similar over here, you have somebody who probably spanned the camera around them, and they just took a video or picture of their picnic, yet it condenses everything and gives it this more tunnel vision of a look, which is really fun. Again, there's a lot of cool things that you can do with these 360 cameras that make them more unique and special, and I see a lot of people online who use them, which I think, again, for things like Instagram or YouTube, it's very, very popular. And that's all I have for you guys. So
that's very interesting.
Yeah.
What are the prices? For me, I could see practically, maybe I'd look at one of those original started up GoPros.
Yeah.
What do they run?
You can get one for as cheap as about $240, and you can go all the way up to about $400. I think 400 or 500 is the most expensive. In the $240 one, it's still 4K video. It's just the older model. At this point, I think that's the Hero 10 that you'll be looking at. They're on the 12th version
And
right
how
now.
small? I mean, is it? It's like that,
Yes. Very tiny. Very tiny.
and it's good for photos. You said.
Yeah. It takes great photos, 24, 22 megapixel cameras. If you're worried about that, then I probably would tell you to get one of the newer ones, like the 12 or the 11, because that'll have the best camera on there. It'll have much more
And they're
megapixels.
24 megabytes.
The newer ones are 48.
Wow.
Yeah. Great cameras, powerful. They do a lot. They're just really
It seemed to
sharp.
be easy to take with you.
Yeah.
I mean, this thing, when I'm moving going on vacation, I gotta find a place to put this.
Higher quality image on that one. You can blow it up, you can zoom in, you can crop. There's more editing that you can do on there, and that's where the GoPro slacks a little bit. But because of its size, that's not really what people are really looking for with that. They're looking for that action, that first point of view, that more fun video. Even myself, On my YouTube page, I have a video that I put up not too long ago. I do this event where I march in a parade every year. I have the GoPro Velcroed to my chest, and you can see everybody along. You see my hands, you see everything I'm doing, and it just looks really cool and unique. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for coming out, as always. Anybody online, I'll leave it open for just a little bit longer here. I know we're at 6:30, so this is usually when questions come up. So,
Good.
yeah.
It was very interesting.
It's different. It's different. Yeah.
More than what I know.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? I have a 27-inch iMac
Okay.
from about 2017, where it still has the card reader in it, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a 2 terabyte computer.
Yeah.
I have never backed up anything on that computer.
Okay.
I have probably 190 terabyte of pictures on it.
Yeah.
What do you suggest I do?
I would probably go buy a couple hard drives.
Is there a hard drive that will take all of it?
They make 1 terabyte hard drives.
Not 2.
They probably do. They're probably like $300.
Right.
And you can get. I mean, I think we have one here in the store that's 10 terabytes.
So
you can get big ones.
So how is this done? Can you bring the computer in and you guys would do that? Or?
They can actually. I believe our guys downstairs. So if you go where the fountain is, go to the Connect Center. That's where you go. Yeah. But even just check in with them too, because our guys in the back in the Connect squad. That's one of the things that they can do. I don't know what fee or anything else that they have for that, because it's a lot of information. But in general, if you were to want to go about doing that at home, it's as simple as putting the hard drive in.
Yeah.
The hard drive will pop up just like your SD card would.
Right.
And then all you do is basically just drag and drop everything to the hard drive.
How do you, those are all in my pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Can you take my pictures somehow and just say here it is?
You can basically just go to all photos, grab one, hit shift, and then that should select every single photo, and then you can drag it in. You're talking about 1.9, almost 2 terabytes worth of photos. That's gonna take hours, but it'll work.
Could it run by itself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you would do all that and basically just leave it alone, and then it would basically tell you on the Mac how long it would take.
Or take the 27-inch and bring it here.
Yeah.
And say, guys, back it up, and I'll pay for whatever it costs.
Yep. My family did that years ago before I got better at this stuff. When I was much, much younger, all this stuff was brand spanking new to them. They're like, we don't understand any of this computer stuff. They actually would come down to the Apple store all the time and have them do it for them here. And same thing, they would basically take everything, back it up to a hard drive, and we would consider that the fund where
but that would be done not at Apple, that would be done at the Connect.
And originally, it used to get done at Apple. Now
we can take it to the
Connect guys. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, definitely.
And they'd sell me the drive.
Hard drive, everything.
And they'd tell me how much it would take to clear it.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I have my photos in iPhoto.
Yeah.
And I've also duplicated them in my pictures.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So I have them in 2 different places, but it's the same computer.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's not so good.
No, you definitely want them in more than one. I mean, the nice thing with depending on what you're using with the iPhoto, you could be paying for cloud storage, but if you have so many photos on there, it probably is too much for that.
I don't majority. I use most of it. I put them in 2 places. I load them automatically to iPhoto, but then I take the actual photos off of the drive and bring them into my pictures.
Okay.
And I keep them all at the highest level.
So years ago, I bought one of our safes that we sell here. We sell just a small, little Avanti safe. I think it's cost like $170.
Right.
And I bought myself another hard drive, and I have one hard drive that lives by my computer, and then I have one that lives in the safe. And it's just so that way, again, it's a fireproof safe. It can withstand, I think, temperatures of close to like 800 degrees, 1,000 degrees.
I mean, this is probably, I don't know how many years of photos that is in that, because originally I had 27-inch one before, and it was like running out of power.
Yeah.
So I bought the new one, brought the old one, terabyte.
Yeah.
So now I'm wondering,
I would highly.
I should do something sooner than later, is what you said. So the 2017.
Most likely the computer will be fine. Those Macs are built really good. It's not like a laptop where you're carrying around and it's got a small battery. Those Macs are iMacs. I have an iMac at home too, and the only other thing I use is an iPad. So I have my iPad and I have the iMac.
Right.
The newer iPads act just like a MacBook, and so I don't necessarily need to ever get anything
I just
more.
got a new iPad
Yes, awesome.
for my trip that I do go.
Good.
So the only thing is that schlepping that thing
It's
in
big.
here is
Yeah.
big.
The hard drive's not bad. I mean, it's pretty simple to do. I think you could get it done at home.
Yeah.
And the nice part too is you don't have to schlep it in. You don't have to pay anything for it. You pay the extra, $300-400 for a big bad hard drive, and then again, just put that somewhere safe in the house where
Yeah.
you know it'll live, and then
Right.
should be good.
Right, but I better do something because I'm thinking, what if?
It's always the what if, and that's the reason why we back things up. And I always, especially in the beginning of this class, the intro class,
Right.
the big thing I stress is those SD cards, having two, but then making sure that if all of your stuff lives on your computer, I mean, all it takes is for one day that not to turn on, and then what do you do? My family has photos from an old computer that I eventually got to turn on, but they don't remember the password, unfortunately, to get onto the physical computer. And again, it's just sitting on there, and we all are kind of like, how many photos from, early 2000s,
Right.
late 90s are on this thing that we probably will never see again. So,
Because originally when I was printing, when I was doing photos and filming,
yeah.
I also was able to, like a Wolf camera or something, they gave me the discs too.
Yeah,
So then I put the discs in.
yeah. And you got those all downloaded.
And saved it that way.
Yeah, yeah. No, you definitely want to go about getting those backed up to multiple sources,
Well,
just to have them.
I think I should talk to them.
Yeah.
Apple would do it probably too, their Apple stores.
I'm sure. I don't know what that would. I don't know. I mean,
But I think your guys would be better than the Apple guys.
I heard from a customer, and I don't know how true it is, but I know if you go to an AT&T store and let's say you buy a brand new phone, they won't help you transfer the data.
Right.
They'll send you a video, tell you to go do it at home.
Right.
I've heard Apple does that too a lot of the times, or they'll tell you to book an appointment and come back on a later day to get it done.
And then take your turn.
Yeah, and then but we do it right here automatically for you. If you buy a phone or an iPad, we transfer everything there
Right,
just to get it
I know.
done. It can, again, it can differ, but that would always be my recommendation. If anything, our guys are just nice about it. They'll get you through and they'll get you a price on it, whatever it is. If not, though, they'll always be able to like walk you through over the phone, talk to you, so that way you can do it at the comfort, not have to schlep that 27-inch in and keep.
I've taken it in a couple times already to the Apple store.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Right. Anyway, thank you.
Anytime.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. No,
knowing
seriously. I love
knowing you.
Anytime.
And your help has been terrific.
Oh, good. Of course, I'm glad that you came in. I'm glad I got to meet you. And again, you've got my information.
I
Call me,
do.
email
I
me
do.
anytime something comes
I
up. I'm
do.
always
And I'm Jeffrey Dubow.
Yes.
Right. And it'll be great to know somebody who can actually help me because I hope to try to do a little bit more.
It's my background is in fine arts. I'm a painter. I'm a drawer. That's my cup of tea. And I am really proud of the fact that we have such a beautiful camera department. And
Oh my God, there isn't any others.
There's not. I would put our store up there with things like B&H Photo, where it's just having the ability not only.
B&H Photo, you can't touch the product.
I've heard.
Here you can't.
I've heard. I know.
Unless you go to New York.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I'm really proud of what we have here, and I think again with cameras as a whole, once you get your first camera, knowledge is power when it comes to it. I don't have to necessarily sell you on the most expensive camera, but once you know that that's the direction to go in, that's where then the fun, all the sales, everything else comes from. So
Right. So I will definitely think about that, but it's so great when like you show me the lenses, we put it on my camera.
Yeah.
We said, oh, this is what it is.
yeah.
And it's great.
And that's the best part. And I tell that to anybody, same thing anybody online. If you're buying a camera or you're wanting to buy a lens, bring your camera in with you here, and we can kind of go through everything and look at stuff myself. And I've got other
You
people.
can't go anywhere online.
No.
And your price is the same anyway.
Exactly. And we usually do our best to get you the lowest.
Anyway, thank you.
Anytime.
I may stop and connect if they're not busy and ask them what that would
Yeah, by all means.
to do that, but we'll see. All right, thank
I'll be
you.
here. Good seeing
Bye.
you, Jeff. Alright, I'll give it a few more minutes to anybody online. If anybody wants to ask any other questions, by all means, now is the time. Alright guys, it doesn't look like anybody else had too many questions online for me. Thanks for everybody that watched. As always, I appreciate having you. Get out there, keep taking photos, keep taking videos, and as always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns for me, email me, call me, and we'll take care of you here at App. So have a great night, everybody. Be safe, and I will see you guys next week.